How are you feeling? Good. Okay. Really excited for this panel to talk about the state of the DeFi ecosystem in Asia. Welcome, everyone. Just want to take a step back and just let's kind of like imagine where we've come from. DeFi summer took off in 2020 when the whole world was kind of in global lockdown, and we are now, thanks to Erica and Nicole, in one of the first crypto conferences in Vietnam since the pandemic. So a lot has happened in the last 2 years, and I think a lot has happened kind of online. We haven't really had a gathering like this before, and so super exciting to hear the perspective from Asia particularly, because I think there's been a lot of conferences in Europe and the US, but I think we haven't heard much from the Asia perspective. So to kick it off, I mean, welcome. So we've got Dr. Binh, we've got Bobby, Glenn, Alex, and Stu. Yes. Just want to make sure I pronounce it right. And I'm Samantha Yap, founder of Yap Global. We're a PR agency. So to kick it off, could each of you kind of share your impressions of the state of the DeFi ecosystem in Asia? Anyone can take it first. Dr. Binh?
Okay, sure. Hi, everyone. So I'm Binh from RMIT. So I think I've been working, researching and educating in this area since 2018, around there. And of course, I was very excited when DeFi got really hot, 2020, 2021. I think now we have experimented a lot. And now in the bear market, I think it's a good time for us to review what we've done, what have we achieved. Also, what probably didn't work out so well, and we need to think about our next strategy. How are we going from today? I think locked value of DeFi is something like 100 billion, under 100 billion if we're optimistic, going to 1 trillion, 10 trillion, because if you think about the global bond market, it's over $100 trillion. So right now, if we just compare DeFi locked value to the bond market, it's only under 0.1% of the global bond market. Okay, so how can we get from 0.1% to 1%, 5%? I think this would be a huge success for DeFi. And I think right now in this bear market, after a lot of ups and downs, we can come up with a new strategy and new products to really make the next step in the evolution.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bobby from Verse2. Very pleasure to be here. Well, as a DeFi builder, the bear market impacted us in various ways. But still, I think the market is growing, and like the audience and the customers are maturing. So we need to come up with more of a structure of finance. So it's quite a challenge for us or DeFi builders to come up with some of the products with the finality. So yes, it will grow up. Yeah.
Right.
Hi. It's great to be here. I'm Glenn at Blockdaemon. So going through the bear market at this stage, I believe we're lacking a lot of infrastructure. So there's more infrastructure for the investor to be better informed about what they're investing in. As compared to the traditional markets, there are large players that are providing a lot of different infrastructures. Like these data analytics platform. News, research, compliance tools, and so on and so forth. So, from an institutional perspective, we're largely lacking that to really expect a significant adoption coming in from the traditional finance. And also from a retail perspective, just as what Phil has just presented as well, we're largely lacking, a lot of good user experience on the retail front. So right now we have some time to build for that, and I'm sure that all of us here together, on the stage and also on the floor as well, we're all kind of striving to get there for a bigger adoption.
Hi everyone, I'm Alex. So I work for Chorus One, and I guess traditionally we focused more on the European markets and the United States, but I'm particularly excited about where the Asian market is going to go, where it's at currently and where it's going to go over the next few years. I was in Korea recently and I was really impressed with the community out there. I've read a ton of reports around kind of centralized exchanges and adoption over there in the Asian market. As you've already alluded to here, the kind of traditional finance market is very big here as well, and they will potentially bootstrap some of these DeFi protocols that are existing right now. So, on the whole, very excited, and I think there's some unique economic conditions in Asian countries that will potentially boost the adoption of DeFi protocols as well. So, overall, very excited.
Yep, so this is Stu from StableNode and also a delegate from Maker. I would say that DeFi ecosystem in Asia is very different, but also very big. For example, we saw that DeFi ecosystem in Asia tend to be more friendly toward trying multi-chain, as well as focus more on the access through like mobile, as well as especially recently, both from Korea, China, and many countries, those regulation has really impacted them. Actually, just for Maker itself, like China is the largest or second largest user base. So there's a lot of users. It's just that both the exposure as well as the this kind of marketing and understanding might be limited. So happy to talk more about it in the panel.
Yeah, thank you, Du. Thanks for that. And I think, we're going to touch on regulation in a bit, but I like what Alex said about how there's some unique, economic and market conditions for DeFi to really take off here in this region. What have been some of the misconceptions about DeFi in Asia that some of you have seen? Du?
Yep. So there are many misconceptions. I think that one of them has been that a lot of different protocols or let's say the projects, they like to think that there's not much DeFi happening in Asia. But in reality, there actually have been a lot of different ways that DeFi has made it into, for example, average users. Both in China as well as Korea, and also if you look at, for example, a lot of exchanges, is that they were one of the first ones to able to take advantage of, for example, such a reward system from DeFi. That also applies to OKEx, Binance, and many others. And as well as that, a lot of users are, for example, just for Maker, like China itself is like number 1 or number 2, but a lot of different protocols, especially from US or Europe, don't hear about that. So I had many others had a misconception that there's no market for it, but no, like the market is big. It's just that because a lot of, both from the language side, as well as because the exposure from what they're doing is not really shown, I must say the market is very big. So, once again, that has been one of the misconceptions.
Yeah, anyone else? I mean, Du, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I've been telling a few people that I've met over the last few days. We work in PR. We work with a lot of media, especially in the crypto space, but it's predominantly US and European focused, mainly because of the language barrier actually. And it's cool to meet journalists from Vietnam, and also there's some journalists from Indonesia here that have their own respective language media publications. But yeah, we need more reporters covering the crypto region and DeFi space here. Is there anyone who wants to chime in here on the misperceptions?
Yeah, I think one particular challenge that I see, at least here for the Vietnamese market, is that when I see people in the crypto industry talking about DeFi, it's like something that is trying to tear apart the traditional financial system and rebuild it with something totally decentralized. And I think when I talk to the policymakers here and the traditional financial industry in Vietnam, working on, how we design the policies here, it's just very hard to take this narrative and explain, right, to the policymakers, because again, to my original point at the beginning, what we need to think about is how do we get from 0.1% to 1% to 5% to 10%. And I think that we need the on-ramp of the traditional financial guys. We also need the policies that are in place for our industry to grow. So maybe we need to reshape the narrative a little bit in terms of, how can DeFi enhance and complement the existing financial system, right? Where are the benefits? What are the really key benefits of DeFi? In contrast to just saying that we are trying to tear apart the traditional financial infrastructure, so which is just not constructive. So I think in terms of misconception, this is what I see as the really biggest challenge for DeFi to be institutionalized and to be regulated here on the Vietnamese market.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dr. Binh. I think, Glenn, you can weigh in here with what Blockdaemon are doing. What's Blockdaemon doing to kind of bridge from, say, DeFi and the traditional financial institutions?
Well, I think what Blockdaemon does in the space, we make it easy for any developers, including the Web2 companies, to easily build their applications on different blockchains. So at Blockdaemon, we currently have support for about 60 different blockchains, and it's very easy for anybody to spin up whatever node, Bitcoin node, Ethereum node, Solana node, and the list goes on and on. So we want to be more of a cloud provider for these nodes. So hopefully what we're doing in this space bridges the gap between the Web2 space and here. But kind of going back to the original question, I think I wouldn't say so much misconception, but even my perception of DeFi is like it's something that is very hardcore, so very difficult to access, and you have to have a lot of crypto knowledge to access DeFi, and unless you spend a lot of time on it, like you don't know what you're doing. But if you take a broader sense of what DeFi is capable of doing, it could be not just financial, taking away market share from the financial industry is obviously a very, very big goal, but also how insurance policies, when you make a claim, how that gets paid could be also part of DeFi. GameFi is also part of DeFi as well. So there is a much larger concept of DeFi that I'm sure will get there in the near future. But as I kind of introduce in my opening kind of statement, to be honest, there's a lot of way to go.
Bobby, you're building a few kind of applications and protocols for DeFi. Could you share a little bit more about what you do and how you're advocating for DeFi adoption in Asia?
Yes. Yes. We built several DeFi protocols on different chains, but we start with the very basic stuff. But now we're trying to adapt the more of a mature financial engineering to the products, so we can come up with more of the products that can actually the users come to use with the confidence or trust. So what we're trying to do is that we're trying to gain some trust from the customers or the users. So we have a lot of work to do, but that's why we need to study a lot and do a lot of research on it. Yeah.
Moving on to, say, the climate, the regulatory climate in Asia, we've got Vietnam has kind of banned crypto as a means of legal payment, and I think, there are other kind of countries that like Korea that have had this stance on crypto as well, even more so now. Can anyone comment on what's needed to perhaps work to work with regulators and kind of progress the narrative about DeFi in a positive way?
I think going back to what you said in terms of this misconception around DeFi versus traditional finance is kind of misheld. For us to kind of have real adoption, there has to be communication, there has to be negotiation and working with people, regulators, traditional finance, not against them. And I think that's going to be necessary, the kind of regulatory clarity is going to be necessary for real traditional finance onboarding as well. What I can say from working at Chorus One, we are Switzerland based, and the regulatory environment there is very robust, very secure, and that is very appealing to a lot of our partners in the Asian region where it's less so. And so a lot of people reach out to us as staking partners because of that reason, and it shows me and the rest of the team at Chorus that there is a real concern around the regulatory environment in Asia. So I think once we can kind of iron out those creases and work with regulators rather than against them, adoption will just rocket.
Actually, one of the kind of ironic thing is that the more government try to regulate crypto, the more demand for DeFi there is. Actually, for example, if you look at China itself, once there was a regulation that basically banned most Chinese users from using futures or like margin trading on Chinese exchanges, many of the capital and demand actually went to DeFi, right? Because on DeFi, you can still, for example, open positions. And we saw that a lot of, for example, futures traders went to platforms like, DYDX, as well as like even for, Maker and others. So in a way, I wouldn't say the regulation itself is something that's bad per se. And also, it's really hard to work with the regulators, right? Like, I'm pretty sure that many of us, we have talked to governments before, have educated them, but their understanding of, let's say, DAO or DeFi into what they understand about traditional finance is very different. So I just want to point out that regulation itself is not necessarily bad for adoption of DeFi, similar to how, in a way, Bitcoin and crypto itself kind of came from such, because of their limits and restrictions, it was kind of people to access it. Similarly, when there's actually more restrictions, people try to find different ways, still have the access to finance, and that can mean that they try to find access to DeFi.
Yeah, that's a point. Dr. Binh?
Yes, I think I can talk a little bit about the Vietnamese regulatory landscape here. So I think as an industry, we just need to do a better job in really seeking the conversation with the traditional financial guys as well as the regulators. So for example, actually in Vietnam, we had a blockchain sandbox proposal, but I think that most of the people in the audience are not aware even that there's a blockchain sandbox proposal. And when I talk to the many of the blockchain companies in Vietnam and seeking the conversation with them, whether they're interested in, let's say, inputting, providing feedback, and so partly design actually the blockchain sandbox, most of them didn't think this was a topic that they would be interested in. So I think this is a little bit in terms of the incentives, right? So many of the companies, they probably think that without regulations, their businesses run better even. So why should they care about regulations? But I think for us as an industry to grow in the long run, we need to have some types of proper regulations and alignment with the traditional financial guys. And I just hope that also people today in the audience that if you are interested in, let's say, having a say, designing the regulations in Vietnam, working with the policymakers, just let me know, and then let's see what we can do together, because this is something that I and my team, we've been doing since 2019, really trying to work with the regulators on this to get the regulations that are good for the industry. Because there are very strict regulations, there are mild regulations, and there are suitable regulations. So I think that we need something in between strict and too soft, to really help this industry to grow. From my opinion, the Vietnamese policymakers are actually very open to contributions from the industry.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Dr. Binh. I think from a builder's perspective, with a few builders in the room here, and with, you opened up by saying that, we're still early in terms of the kind of total value locked on DeFi. It's pretty small compared to, the traditional markets. And we are still in this experimental phase, and there's a lot of innovation going on. Is there that kind of perception within builders that, on DeFi, it's better to experiment right now first before kind of working closely with regulators, because it's perhaps, could slow kind of innovation and development down if you wait around for approvals and stuff? It's a sensitive question. Anyone want to comment on that?
Well, I think, regulators have a very tough job here when it comes to regulating DeFi, because, crypto or blockchain, fundamentally is not just restricted to a single jurisdiction. And, DeFi, they're applicable for, all of the blockchain applications. So, like, what do the regulators have to really regulate? And a lot of the regulations that's actually coming out in crypto space is to regulate the activities of the people that are buying or holding or doing, whatever that they can do or they cannot do using the tokens. So, I have to say that regulators have a really tough job. And I think it becomes like a chicken and an egg problem. Like, if there's a startup DeFi project, you know, of course, right now, like you said, could be a good time to start. But, you know, unless they get a lot of adoption, you know, under the radar of the regulators and have enough capital and enough backing to really face the regulators in a lot of different jurisdictions, they have no chance. So, you know, I really don't have an answer here, but, you know, it's a chicken and an egg problem. And I think, you know, as we saw from the Tornado Cash kind of ban coming from the US, you know, as you can see, the regulators are regulating the Americans from accessing that protocol. And, you know, that's the, I guess, maybe the only few options that the regulators have. Yeah, so, yeah, just my thought on that.
Yes, I think this is a really, really good comment. So it's really, really difficult for regulators to implement policies here, and that's why I think why it's so important that for us as an industry that we need to handhold them. We understand the benefits of this and why it's revolutionary and really help to transform the financial landscape, bringing financial inclusion and freedom to everyone in the world. But the key part here is that we need to create win-win situations. It needs to be a win for the government, it needs to be a win for the traditional financial guys, and it needs to be a win for the blockchain guys and the users. Right? So how can we design this? I think we will need to make compromises there. I don't think that the next step of the financial market is total decentralization, but there will be some types of centralization with probably control, access, things like KYC, ML, probably in place, in my opinion. But as long as we get this idea into the policies of, okay, that we are using data as assets and then we are bringing utility and financial services to everyone in the world through wrapping software around this data, I think this is already a big win for our industry. So we don't have to create totally new rules for that.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think let's move into where DeFi adoption is heading in Asia. I mean, we've seen the space maturing and interest in the space maturing with kind of institutions perhaps investing in DeFi and GameFi. You know, namely, you know, there's Thailand's Siam Commercial Bank. They have this venture arm. They've been pouring money into the space, SCB10X, and other institutions, which perhaps, well, Glenn, you've seen this as well in your work with Blockdaemon. Yeah, what's kind of been your impressions, everyone on the panel, of, you know, institutions looking into DeFi, but perhaps adopting it and kind of playing around with it?
Yeah, I think the DeFi market in Asia is driven by the users, actually. There's a lot of institutions and regulators, or the large companies are actually moving to the Web3 or GameFi, DeFi, but still they're way behind. So the users are way ahead of the companies and the commercial banks. So what they need to do is that they really need to focus on, or actually give them a try to study this the sector of DeFi. So,
what is some advice for them to study and kind of keep up when all this innovation's happening, and then they have to go through maybe a few rounds of approvals before they try something?
Well, like a lot of institutions, especially crypto funds, are made by only crypto venture capitals. We don't see the Goldman Sachs coming into the blockchain scene making a crypto fund. So we need some more of the movement to the institutional or the TradFi companies.
Yeah, I think about learning Web3, so some shameless advertisement here. So of course you can study at RMIT. We offer blockchain business major, preparing you for Web3. But yeah, back to your question about traditional financial institutions look into this place. Actually, I'm working with Vietnam's biggest investment fund on this topic, and we're looking at the blockchain technology and see how DeFi may fit into the Vietnamese financial system. So it involves a lot of education nowadays, even though very open, very interested, but it's really taking a lot of efforts to just putting the ideas in the right place, right? So because, for example, the ideas of decentralized finance, so the name itself it's already quite hard to bring it to traditional financial guys. But okay, how can we make financial system that's totally centralized, like you said? Maybe we have to reframe it like, okay, it is some types of digital finance, for example. Okay, much easier to deal with, much easier to think about. At this stage, we're still just looking at how we can do something. It's not like we have a roadmap or a clear idea, but I do see that the traditional financial institutions in Vietnam are gradually moving in this space.
I think it's also worth pointing out as well, there's always a kind of, rightfully so, a disproportionate focus on, you know, traditional financial institutions investing in some of these DeFi protocols. But they also utilize the actual underlying functions sometimes themselves. So we've seen things like Maker, Compound actually provide loans to some of these traditional finance companies. And we've seen them, you know, provide loans to SMEs as well. So it's not just always about, you know, investing, but also actually using the protocols and maybe getting better rates than what traditional finance banks might provide institutions. So, you know, we've seen a lot of equity investments, and that's kind of a given. I think at this point we know a lot of institutions are investing in these projects, but we're seeing more and more of them actually using the lending facilities, which I think is quite exciting.
Seems like that didn't really work, but yeah. So I want to, you know, echo the sentiment, because there are a lot of institutions that invest in, for example, DeFi protocols or DeFi related, you know, companies, right? Like even in Korea itself, like BUIDL, which is one of the, you know, largest, you know, financial companies, they've been actively investing. Same for like Samsung Next and others. But at the same time, trying to use DeFi itself, it's much more difficult. Actually, there are some, I would say, institutions that did work with DeFi. For example, there were some that use, you know, Terra as well. Ending wasn't so good, probably didn't mean it, but you can also imagine that it's much difficult for them to actually like try to work with DeFi protocol themselves. And also, right now, a lot of appeal for DeFi has been very difficult. Especially right now for US Treasury itself is giving higher yield than most of DeFi protocols. So really like the benefit of it is becoming a little bit more difficult to appeal.
Yeah, I would echo Du's point. You know, like a lot of the investments that we're seeing in the space are made from more of a venture capital angle. And if you look at, you know, traditional like portfolio of large asset managers or pension funds or sovereign funds, you know, there's venture capital, you know, strategy which probably accounts for about 2 or 3% of their total asset allocation in any new tech. So, you know, it could be space technology, it could be driverless cars, it could be crypto. So, you know, that's probably the angle that they're coming in from. But obviously with the mindset that there is bigger application, you know, on the financial, you know, disruption side of things. So, you know, that's the reality. And, you know, we confuse or we misuse the word like institutional investors. And to different people, institutional investors, different things. But to Professor's point, you know, if you want to go from 0.1% to 1% to 5% to 10%, then that really needs to move the mindset of the bigger guys, like, you know, $1 trillion, you know, asset manager, you know, like $500 billion sovereign funds and things like that. We're not really talking about those, I don't know, like technology native VC that just happen to be big. You know, they have different kind of risk appetite. So, you know, there's, for them to really purchase crypto and to understand it and go further beyond and really understand the smart contract language behind DeFi and having to have that, you know, take that risk to deploy, you know, the actual crypto to make yields. That's probably, you know, we probably have some steps to go to be a little bit more frank and realistic. So, you know, to be a little bit more specific, what we're lacking, you know, like I said, a lot of infrastructure is lacking, you know, like just looking at compliance. These large asset managers with multiple different, you know, asset allocation strategy, they have compliance rules and measures, and they have a big team, you know, in terms of how they want to, you know, kind of manage their risks. And in order for them to actually come up with some of the strategies, it requires a lot of different data and track record of different teams with expertise over years and years and years of experience. We obviously don't have that. There are teams that are building that as well, and also integration with everything that they're using from core banking technology platform, with from the front office to the middle office to the back office. So we need integration so that if there's a CIO of a large fund, he or she has a very clear kind of view on what's going on with the entire fund. And also security and custody is another topic as well. How do we streamline so that the custodians that can handle cash, bond, traditional assets, gold, treasures, metals, and these other type of alternative assets, how are they going to train themselves to use this technology and to kind of manage those assets on a level ground? So I think there's probably a little more building for us to do in order to really see major adoption coming in from institutional players.
I'm gonna, thanks for that, Glenn, and fair points there. I want to challenge you a little bit and hear from the panel on this, but the other kind of right now, I think coming off a bull market and we're in a bear market though, but the other benefit of DeFi is that you could have small teams, like 15 to 20 people running these DeFi protocols that are, they don't have, it's not like trillions, but they're managing, they could manage as high as, hundreds of million or $1 billion. And yet they operate quite lean and operationally because, everything's decentralized and automated. Do we see two different worlds forming where there's this, the DeFi protocol teams kind of developing and growing, but then there is the centralized finance or traditional finance players that are trying to enter in? Can anyone comment on that?
Is the question with regards to the Web3 companies, in terms of their
Web3,
building strategy?
DeFi and the strategy, yeah. Do they need to be as large as traditional financial organizations that have big compliance teams and yeah.
No, it's fine. Just like DeFi, sometimes it can be broken, but don't worry, we can always replace it. But regarding that, that's actually a really interesting point, and I must say that DeFi ecosystem has changed a lot, right? Because as you mentioned, there are a lot of DeFi protocols, and I remember Uniswap was very kind of famous for it, where they have fewer than 10 people, but their trading volume was higher than Coinbase, which had 500, 600 people back then, right? So in a way, the DeFi protocol, because it used smart contract, are much more efficient. However, some of the interesting happening now is that you can technically just fork the code, and you don't even need technically developers yourself. It became very easy to access it. Now the issue is that once you become big and you want to maintain your position, that's where you kind of need more members, right? And this was the same case for some of the protocols that we see, including even Uniswap or Maker as well, is that now you became big, that also means that you're to be a target of many different things, right? If you're small, for example, do you need to worry about even intellectual property? Probably not much. How about the legal side? And not just that, what about HR? What about some other things? So we have seen that as those DeFi protocols become bigger, although they're DeFi protocols, they also need to deal with some of the real world things, right? And I would say that especially right now is that, for example, if you look at Aave or Maker or even Compound, is that, and also Wan Nam and others, is that a lot of DeFi protocols have been targeting institutions. And the reason why they've been targeting institutions is because we, kind of came to conclusion that within DeFi, crypto liquidity is, limited. And then the best way to access and then try to grow is trying to access this traditional market where there's literally $1 trillion, right? So in order to do that, that also means that you need to put more people, right? Because you need people to negotiate with them. You also need to do research and others. So I think we have seen that a lot of like leading DeFi protocols become heavier. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that a lot of new protocols have to be like that, right? And for a lot of them, they can just fork the code, start new, especially launch a new chain that the market is not there yet. So I would say that entry is becoming lower and lower and lower, but trying to maintain is becoming harder. It's kind of my thinking.
Yeah, I think Samantha made a very good point and challenge here, the idea, right? Whether we need this complex institutionalization and the compliance part. So I think, let's say 50 years from now, I may think about a world where a team, 10, 20 people can build smart contracts, automated financial services for 1 billion people. Maybe this will work 50 years from now when everyone is quite already adapted with smart contracts, with programming, so that they can just make sure that the smart contract works as intended, right? But I think we are very, very far away from that. So probably, I don't know how many millions of people around the world today understand smart contracts. Okay, so if you don't understand smart contracts, then how can you put trust in new financial products, right? Particularly if it doesn't have the compliance and all of the licenses that normal traditional financial institutions have. So then it's really hard to scale the business, right? You can go to 100 million, you probably may even go to 1 billion, but if you want to go higher than that, it's just very difficult with a small team that doesn't really care so much about compliance and regulations.
I was just going to say, I think the goal really of any blockchain-based protocol should be to be trustless and, code is law kind of thing. I know that's the ideal situation. I think there'll be a period of time where teams will be necessary to kind of build that infrastructure and have it in place. But in my opinion, the end goal should always be to be as less human intervention as possible. So to answer your question, I think more succinctly, I don't think we should be striving to be as big from a human resource perspective as traditional finance. We should be going in the opposite direction. That should be the goal. Right now, I think traditional finance is extremely wasteful in terms of resources, costs, and this is the whole kind of selling point of blockchain technology to me.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Yeah, that's where we sit right now. We've got just a few more minutes. Just want to ask you guys kind of final parting thoughts. Where do you think DeFi will be in Asia in the next 5 years? I know, Dr. Binh, you started off by seeing where we're heading in 50 years, but 5 years, given all that we've spoken about right now.
Maybe I can start?
Yeah.
So I think Asia has a unique benefit. A certain part of Asia that, it's got the potential to actually jump some, technology development cycle. And what I'm talking about is, say for example in China, like 10 years ago, they didn't really have credit card and they just jumped into like mobile payment and there was very little friction. But if you look at places like the US, because of the initial kind of payment disruption happened in the US through credit card, it's very difficult to persuade these people to jump to mobile payment because credit card is so like entrenched and it's so much invested into that market that there's a lot of like political aspect as well as something that just cannot be user experience and mindset just cannot be just switched in just like that. So, in a certain part of Asia, like as we could see from, some GameFi kind of frenzy that happened, last year, which I think it's a big movement. There's a potential to jump, into something like DeFi without having, these mostly retail people having to worry too much about, what their existing kind of, what they're currently using. I think that's going to be something that is unique to Asia.
Well, thanks, Gwen. Du or Alex?
I've seen some interesting statistics around the number of adults in Asia who don't have bank accounts, and I've seen some interesting statistics around the difficulty it is for SMEs to obtain things like standard loans from banks here. If we combine that with the talent pool of build is here, and the institutions who are adopting DeFi, you have a natural demand for the product and the ability to satisfy that demand on either side. So in 5 years, I suspect the Asian market will have a big DeFi market.
Cool.
Yep, and I think that Glenn made a really good point about, for example, in China, like a lot of people use mobile for payment, and we have seen something similar for DeFi as well. It's that many of the users, especially in Asia, a lot of them, for example, accessing through MetaMask, a lot of them will try to use more mobile crypto wallets, right? And I think they will kind of see that happening as well. Even in Korea, for example, Clayton, the blockchain, works with the KakaoTalk, and then you can just use on the mobile. So I think in 5 years, unless there's like really bad bear market that we all need to work for other industry, I assume that there will be a lot of innovations. They especially focus a lot on increasing access, and I think they will especially see a lot of like mobile focused, easy to use, almost no fee, like features that integrate with DeFi in Asia.
Bobby?
Yes, I'm pretty sure the DeFi market in Asia region will grow, but I believe it will grow in a some other direction. We started from the DEX, lending, stable swap, but we haven't seen much of potential with the derivatives. So for the next 5 years, I'm looking for more of a business opportunity with the derivatives markets.
Yeah, I think for the next 5 years, hopefully as an industry, we can work with the traditional financial guys and the policymakers together, so that in 5 years of time, I just hope that if I use my banking mobile app, I can use custody service of my crypto assets there. I can use some of the staking services there, and then I think sky is the limit for DeFi in Asia if we can get it right.
Right, thank you guys. Yeah, so even though we're in the bear market, it's looking positive in the next 5 years. DeFi is here to stay, hopefully. Please join me in thanking the panel. Thank you, Dr. Binh, Bobby, Glenn, Alex, and Ju. Thanks, guys.